On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Mackenzie. And Mackenzie was married to a fault-finding coercive controller. It's a story of isolation, fear, obligation, guilt, shame, survival mode, and freedom. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today, we have Mackenzie. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here today, and if you want to be a guest like Mackenzie, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form link at the top of the page, fill out the form, or just email us at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also, we have a newsletter now at our website. You can sign up to our newsletter and you get a free workbook for every episode that we have going forward for our Survivor Story episodes. And people tell us that these workbooks are quite useful. And the newsletter also has some resources and other insights about the stories that we have on the show, these survivor stories that we have on the show. So go to our website and sign up to that today, or just click on the link in our show notes. And there is a content warning for this episode, as we do discuss physical abuse of a child in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And this episode was recorded a long time ago, and it was lost, and now it is found. And I did my best to get the audio to be decent, so there might be a little bit of a hum you might hear of electricity, but it is much better than what it was before. And today, Mackenzie's story, you're going to hear it. You'll hear about a 27-year marriage, coercive control from early on, and some shame keeping her there at the beginning, belief systems, and then survival mode. And I think she'll validate so many of you out there. So a big thank you to Mackenzie. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Mackenzie, the floor is now yours.
Thank you very much. I really want to let you know how much I appreciate being on here. I think I have listened to every podcast and then some, because it's something that I found the last few years has helped me validate my feelings and what I went through, and just feel like I have a community that I can relate with. So just to kind of start off, I grew up on a farm with other sisters, very normal. Never really saw my parents argue. If my dad raised his voice at us, that was us getting in trouble. So that's all I was really familiar with. And my mom stayed home. She worked hard on the farm. And so I always saw that side of a woman in the home, but I also saw the side of doing all the housework and all those things as well. So that was kind of implanted in my mind. So we were married for almost 27 years, and we met in high school. I was a sophomore, and so this would be like 1988, so a few years ago. And we were set up on a date, and my first looking back, and at that moment, like I hadn't had any other relationships, so I had nothing to base it on. At that time, moms didn't really talk to daughters about relationships and a lot of those things, or my mom didn't anyway, because that's the way she was raised. And so going to her with questions and things was not anything I ever felt comfortable to do. So we were only dating a couple weeks, and he told me that he loved me, which caught me completely off guard because I did not love him. And, hindsight, I should have saw that as a red flag, but I just kept on going. That same year, I guess, was kind of my honor year in high school. And I have a friend that we used to go and run around and do things and stuff. And so he started getting very protective. And not that I should have been drinking at that point, but I was dabbling a little bit in some alcohol. And he was just like, absolutely not. You have no business doing that. I don't want you doing that, or I'm not going to be with you, which was probably smart. And so that's how I kind of took that at that point. But that kind of went on through our relationship, that he was very much against alcohol and did not want me to even have a glass of wine or anything. And it wasn't like his family was brought up that way or anything. So it was just kind of an odd trait of his. But I think it was just more of him telling me what I was going to do and what I wasn't going to do. And so anytime we had an anniversary, I mean, just like a few months, he would send me flowers. I got flowers various times throughout the year, and he would make me feel guilty for hanging around friends. He would always refer that he had a horrible life, that he was basically at a point where he almost wanted to kill himself when we met, and that I was an angel that saved him. And he has used that term throughout while we were married and everything. Oh, it would be me going into my senior year. He went away to boot camp, and he came back, and then I was getting ready to graduate high school, and he gave me a promise ring that my dad was really upset about. It wasn't an engagement ring. I kept telling my dad it's just a promise ring, but my dad saw that as, he was not impressed with that at all. And so I was going to go away to college, and in talking to my parents, one of the things he would tell me is that I was too naive and that I listened to my parents and did everything they said too much, and that I needed to think more for myself, which really meant to think the way he wanted me to think. And so when I was going to go away to college, my mom and I and my dad and I, we talked about it a little bit. They kind of were trying to get me to break up with him so that I could go to college and enjoy myself and not be tied down with him. And so I did that for a couple of days, and then I felt guilty and I felt really bad, and he didn't contact me. He left me alone. I don't know if he would have went any further or not, but I was the one that gave in and said, "Oh, I don't want to be broke up." And he was like, "Okay." I don't, it's been so many years ago. I don't remember exactly how that went down, but we ended up back together within a couple of days. And so when I got back over that Labor Day weekend, after being away at college for a few weeks, he gave me an engagement ring, which really set my parents over the edge. And it said, "Will you marry me in 4 years?" Because we both were in college. And so that was my thing. It's not right now. It's just going to be 4 years from now. But again, my parents saw that it was just a way to keep me secure with him. And so I was away at college for about 6 months, and he would come that first semester, I guess. So he would come and see me, and I would come home some. But it didn't matter if I was gone with my parents or something over a weekend. It didn't matter what time it was. He would show up at my house. And so that was something that they really did not like at that point. It felt like he was just too pushy with our relationship.
So at this point, you started off, you're a teenager, and he is a year older than you. So you're both teenagers. And for some instances here, you can say that you're teenagers, you're immature, and they could grow out of that. Or some of it could be puppy love too, an extreme type of puppy love, but still puppy love. But with that being said, and I'm not giving this person any excuses at all, within the fact that your parents are already worried, and rightfully so. And for you, that worry could be seen as a form of control in a way of how you grew up, or them kind of maybe being a little bit overbearing in some ways. And but they're there and they're worried. And why are they worried? We already at this young age have someone who is love bombing with flowers, which is a lot for a high schooler. Someone that controls your alcohol, controls, trying to say like who you can hang out with, which is isolating behavior. This person is using guilt with his victimhood. He uses suicidal ideation as a form of control. He uses the "you're my savior" as a form of control. For you, this becomes a fear, an obligation, and guilt. It's all three. The promise ring is a form of control. As there's guilt that is attached to it to prevent you from just living. His commitment to you is an obligation, and it is guilt. And he's also saying you listen to your parents too much. So this is where where you told me in your notes that your parents could be a little bit overbearing. So here's kind of like him feeding into the rebelling of that. And this just throws a wedge between you and your parents, and it is controlling and it is isolating, and he's trying to get you to live in his world. And now there's the promise of marriage, another form of control, and your parents just really see it too. And so far, this is a lot of stuff. And you just entered college, and this is going to last 20 plus more years. Now, with that being said at this point, how are you feeling? And we know you got back with him because you felt guilty, but do you have love for him? Are you infatuated in a teenage type of way? You know, what's going on with you?
Okay, so in the very beginning, I think I was because I had a boyfriend type thing, a little bit of that puppy love. Because a lot of times when I would be going through a rough spot with him, I would think back to those moments and that would kind of pull me back in, I think. So I would remember the good, like when we first met type thing, just to keep myself engaged in that. So that was the thing. I was always, for some reason, I don't know exactly why, I had in my head, like, this is it. Like, I just knew I needed to have a boyfriend. I really think that's where my mind was at that point. And so he was there, and I just never felt like, I guess at that point, that I really deserved anymore, which really frustrates me because as I grew up, I kept thinking that I was a stronger person than that and more confident than that. So that's something that I think along the line, along the years, really disappointed myself. So, and that's been hard for me to wrap my mind around. I'll talk about that when I do finally go to a therapist. But so, yeah, it was very much puppy love in the beginning. And I always felt like, oh, I wish I had. But then I would never take that step out to find that. I just would settle with, like, this is what it is. And that's as good as it's going to get kind of mentality, I guess. So that was around the time of Desert Storm. And that all started up. And I had a concern that he was going to get deployed. And I was concerned also about my dad getting deployed. And so I started feeling the need to come back home instead of going to the college that I was going to. And it was very expensive, and I was concerned about the cost of it and everything else. So I transferred to a local college, which was the same college he went to. And so that would have happened where I came home in December. And so then in January, he did end up getting deployed. And he was gone for about 6 months. And a lot of letter writing and phone calls and things like that. And so I don't know. There's many little pieces. It's like I forget over the years and everything. But in us talking back and forth, we decided that we wanted to go ahead and get married when he came back. And that, we just have a small, simple wedding. And we would just keep going to college, keep working. And so one of the things that upset my dad about all that is he never came to my dad to ask for my hand in marriage. So that was always one chip against him in that respect, because I think in looking at my ex now, I see the fact that he didn't feel like he had to, because I don't think he respected, my parents' opinion on anything. I think he felt like he was above that and he didn't need to do that. So we got married in July. And again, it wasn't one of those, like, I just couldn't wait to get married. My dad and I were very quiet about that at that time. And I can remember one night telling my dad, because they were trying to let me do my own thing, but yet they really wanted to stop this. And I remember telling my dad one night, you can't tell me that if somebody was standing here telling you not to do this, that you would listen to them. And he looked at me and he said, you're right. And that kind of was our piece with it. And on we went. So again, where you talk about the just feeling like you're just absolutely in love. I don't really feel like I ever had that. I felt like I was just kind of going through the motions. It was like just the next step of what we should do, because we had been dating for a few years. So I was 19 and he was 20. and we up and got married. And we were living in a small little house and that we rented. And he's always been very money focused and not in spending money, but just always has to have money and always is saying, like, in the future, like, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, but like nothing ever happens. And so it's always a matter of he has to make more money, has to make more money. I will say he's very intelligent, and he was going to school to be kind of in construction engineering type field. And so I was unsure what I wanted to do in college. And as we were married, our first year, we fought a lot. And when we were dating, we didn't really fight at all. I mean, that was just kind of one of the things that people used to say in high school, like, you guys never fight. And we didn't. And I think it was just, I'm kind of an easygoing person, and it takes a little bit before I will stand my ground sometimes. I think the older I get, the more that I'm less that way. But we didn't start fighting until we got married. And if my parents, if I want to do something with my parents or go see my parents, he was upset about it. But yet his parents lived very close by, and he would be there almost every day. And I'd get home and he wouldn't be home. So there was just a rift between us for sure. And a lot of it was just we were young and trying to get in the swing of living together and learning how to adult. And when you're 19 and 20, that's hard to do. But I always felt like a child in some ways to him. And so it made it very hard because it was like more of, we couldn't just have discussions about money or what we were planning on doing. It was more, I felt like I was talked down to. And over the years, that just grew and grew that way. And I feel like it changed me in some ways, the way I relate with in relationships and everything.
So right here, things about this relationship, you aren't feeling worthy beforehand, so you don't feel you deserve better. Kind of sounds like there's a little bit of rebelliousness of like, I know what's best for me against your family. That pushes you into this relationship further. There's future faking going on with saving money for things that don't happen. He gets upset when you see your parents. There's isolating control there, and there's double standards going on as he sees his parents. There's power dynamics at play here with him talking down to you. So first year into this marriage, plus things that already occurred before, and coercive control has really taken hold. You're fighting back at the moment. I don't know if you will win in the future with fighting back because he may wear you down, but this has been formed already here. So a question I have about your fights, what are other types of fights that are happening, and what are they over?
There's so many things at that point. That there was another couple that we were friends with that they were newlyweds as well, and they were kind of going through some rough bumps. And so knowing that somebody else was in that same, predicament kind of, I think, made it seem like it was normal. And he once told this other guy that he thought we were probably going to get a divorce. And when I heard that, it really hit me because I was like, oh, wow, I can't have this. And both my parents, actually, I'm their only daughter together. They had previous marriages. And so I think one of the things that kept me in this marriage, at least in the beginning, was the fact that I did not want to prove to my parents or anybody else that was at that wedding thinking they're too young, they should not be getting married. I didn't want to prove them right. And so I think that was more the reason why I stayed married. There was a guy that I was really good friends with. We had several classes in college together, and he asked me one day, why did you even get married? Because he said, you're going to have kids? I'm like, well, yeah, down the road. And he goes, well, why did you even get married? And I was like, that just hit me because I thought, I have no idea. Like, why did I get married? So one of the times that really hits me in my mind is I worked at a bank, and it was very cold, and I was probably leaving for work late. I don't know, but I know my hair was wet. I remember that. and I was driving my ex's car and it broke down on my way to work. It was starting to freeze up on me. And I called him and he screamed, and my hair was frozen by the time I got to work. That's how cold it was. And he screamed and yelled at me and just, now I'm going to have to fix this car and we don't have the money. And just, we never had money. That's what he would always say, never have money. And it was always about that. And so he just treated me horrible. And I was just bawling. And I always tried to keep up a front that everything was great, that there were no problems. So that was the last thing I wanted to show to my coworkers is that, my husband is screaming and yelling at me like this on the phone. And so I remember calling my mom and she picked up on it right away. That was like one conversation she had with me and asked me if he was being mean to me. So she had been told once by his mother that he had a bad temper. And my mom asked me that at that point, and I hadn't seen that side of him until we got married. And then I got to experience that. That was a vivid memory that I have before we had children.
So I know I'm interrupting a lot here, but I just wanted to point out that things here have been normalized. New couples fight has been installed here, proving your parents and others wrong has really brought you into this. So a couple of ways that is keeping you in this relationship longer. The first one being the normalization of everything, and shame and embarrassment is the second one. And now we find out about his anger issues. So fear is now brought into this. He has outbursts a lot. There's a lot of abuses, control, and there are excuses now being built in. Shame being one that can be quite strong. And this can keep you trapped even further for a long time. So when it comes to him, I've already gotten this sense that he's a little bit of a Mr. Right amongst other abuser types like the victim, demand man, drill sergeant. How does he view himself, and how does he view others, and I guess in relation to himself?
He didn't relate well with people. I always thought that was because he was very intelligent, but he would think of himself as higher than other people and would talk, not to their face, but at other times talk about whatever they did, their work or whatever they did was never to his standard. And any kind of conversation that we would have, a lot of times he would always pull it back around to him. So if he asked me how my day went and I started to say something, he would immediately just barge in and start, talking about whatever he had going on or how I should take care of it when I just wanted him to listen. So that was an ongoing problem that we had. So right off the bat, he worked at a building in the town that we lived in, and it was just, doing like maintenance and some things like that. And this is while he's going to college. And that was my first time noticing how much difficulty he had working with other people, getting along with people. As long as people saw him as a good worker and looked up to him, he seemed to be fine. But if anyone questioned what he did, then he would come home and complain about his job. And so I always described him as having a very negative personality. And so that was something that several people that I would talk to would notice about him. He's always the one that, everything always happened to him. Everybody was always doing things to him. So we moved out of town and we bought some land that we were going to build on. And we moved a trailer onto it to live before we built this house. And so at that point, we were married almost 5 years, and I was pregnant with twins. And when I was getting closer to having them, I decided that it would be easier if I cut my hair. He always liked my hair long, but I thought I need to get my hair cut because I'm not going to have time to take care of it. And I've got these babies coming and everything that way. I don't remember what he said to me that night, but he screamed and yelled and made me feel so horrible. And of course, with hormones and everything else, I'm bawling. And I cried so hard that I broke the blood vessels in my eyes. And so my eyes just looked blood red for days after that. So that was a memorable experience because I had cut my hair. So, you never knew what was going to upset him and what wasn't. But it was always before going to Christmas, any kind of holiday with family. It was always he was going to be mad about something before we got there. And it didn't matter whether it was my family or his family. Sometimes he was worse before we went to his family. And his excuse was, well, my family stresses me out so much. And so that's why I'm upset right now. So any I'm sorry was always still, followed by but and the reason why. And so I had the twins it was about 6 weeks early. I had toxemia. And anytime when I was going through therapy and such and was asked, when did you feel loved? And at that moment, before I went into the hospital and when I was in the hospital, that's when he probably ever showed me the most care. Before that, we had 5 acres and I almost always mowed the pasture. I mowed the yard. I did all of the stuff, even though I had a full-time job as well. I did all of that stuff. And I think part of that is because I felt like that was my job because of seeing my mom do those things. So we did not share in household chores at all. I did all the laundry and all of that. And he worked a lot and he would always say he's got to work so that he can make more money, got to make more money. But when I had the twins, he actually stepped up and his family could be kind of pushy at times. And this was first grandchildren on that side of the family. And so he was really good about standing up and getting them to back off. And because my blood pressure was getting so high and it was getting dangerous and I was put in the hospital on bed rest. And so that was the most love I had felt. And after having the twins, one had more problems lung-wise than the other. And so one needed to be in a NICU while the other was in our room. And he stepped up and did all the things. And now looking back, I think of all of our children that were born. And when he was in the hospital in that spotlight, I think he did all the stuff. And it's taken me this long to finally put those pieces together, and hearing things on podcasts. It's like, oh, well, I guess it wasn't really for me. That was just so that he looked good in that setting. So funny how that kind of happens after a while. So we came home with the twins, and from that point, I started working part-time. And again, a lot of sleepless nights because they were preemies, and I was expected to do all of that, get up with them. And sometimes I blame myself because I didn't really put my foot down about it, because I don't think I felt like that was my place to do that. So we lived out there for a while, and 2 years later, I ended up pregnant with a surprise. We weren't trying to have another baby, and because of my blood pressure issues with my pregnancy, they told me I couldn't be on birth control. So the methods we were using did not work, and we ended up with baby number 3, another boy. And so at that point, decided that with the job that I had, it would be not cost effective for me to keep working. And so I stayed home with the kids and living where we lived. And again, that house that we were going to build, he would always say, we just don't have the money. We don't have the money. And I don't know where his mindset is on that, because there was nothing keeping us from getting a loan and doing that. But it was like always another step ahead and another step ahead. And he really did work hard. So I can't, discount him for that. So then we bought a house that needed fixed up in a city, and it had a very small yard. I had never lived in a town that big before at all, and I'd always lived out in the country. So I knew it definitely was something we would just be fixing up to sell, and that was how we were going to make some more money. And we lived there 2 years, and that house should have never taken us that long, but it was a matter of when he came home, he didn't work on it, or he would be gone doing side jobs and things like that. So it was me and the 3 boys at home, all the time doing things. And again, I took care of I paid the bills, I did all of that. And so there was never any discussion between the two of us on those things. So then when he would ask, well, how much money do we have in here? He never would help with that. And so it was more of, I felt like I was a child being talked to. And so I felt like if I did go buy something, I feel like that put in my head that I needed to be secretive about it because I was going to get in trouble if I bought something. So that's kind of how our relationship was when it came to money.
So at this point of your marriage, you have 3 children. The verbal abuse, the emotional abuse, fear, obligation, and guilt is going on. Angry at you cutting your hair, body autonomy is now happening. He ruins holidays. He has excuses for that. You do all of the housework. At the hospital, he's the hospital hero. In hindsight, you get to see that that's what was really going on. But at that time, it gives him a little bit of a grace for things to carry on as normal. It's kind of a breadcrumb, but also shows that when he wants to be good, he can be good. So now you are at home, 3 kids. Life is a lot different this way. No job. You're locked in. We hear many stories that things can get really bad in these circumstances. And it's not like they weren't bad before. So with the situation that you're now in, what kind of abuses start happening now? Or is it a lot of more of the same? And how are you feeling during this time as well?
Yeah, he would make comments about my weight, that I was gaining weight or, why are you trying to lose weight? Because you're not going to lose it. Those types of things that would come up. And so anything that was around my image or whatever was that way. Something I forgot to add when we were dating, he was very much against not only drinking, but it was time for prom and, everybody would tan or color their hair and things like that. And I wasn't really that interested in coloring my hair, but he made it very clear that he did not want me to color my hair. He did not want me to tan. Very specific on that. But then later, as we're married, he was like encouraging me to do those things. So it's just kind of a interesting. What I think happened there was the fact that he thought maybe I'd be more appealing to other guys. So he didn't want me to do it when we were dating. But once we were married, he wanted me to do it for his benefit, So that's definitely feeling I can't do better. And so there was a lot of, I found myself through the years just always like dreaming of what could be or seeing in fact, like the other couple that I spoke with that had a hard first year of their marriage, they have an awesome marriage and he is a wonderful dad, a great guy. And when you see other dads that are so good with their kids, and when dads come home and the kids will run to them because they want to see their dad, that didn't happen in my house. So that makes it hard. But they saw me as mom and dad in a lot of respects. So the moments that he took the time to play with them and things when they were small, it was like, yes, this is what I want, and there were many times that I really wanted to just give up. And I know my parents would have supported me, but part of it was I just did not want to admit that I was not happy and that it was not a good situation. And with me not working, I didn't really feel like I had that option at that point. So that made a huge impact. So I told him, because the school district that this house sat in was not what I considered a very good school district. And I told him that we had to move because the twins were going to get old enough that they were going to be in kindergarten. And so he finally agreed, and we listed the house, and it still wasn't finished. We listed the house and we had a contract on it in a month. And so we had to fly by the seat of our pants to get this house done. So we sold our house and we bought another house. We had sold the land that we were going to build on and everything. And so we bought a house that, again, needed fixed up. But the location it was on 10 acres and it was in a good school district. And so it was a good move for us, but it was going to need to work some. So I was going to work nights. And we moved out there, and He had all this work, all these ideas of what we were going to do to this house. And so we got started in that. And I was working nights. And so there were a few times that he heated up something in the oven for the kids, some things like that. But other than that, again, when he was home, he would watch the kids some, but he wasn't participating in what they were doing with school or helping do laundry or anything like that when I was gone at work. That did not happen. Cleaning up, nothing. Eventually, I quit that job and he had gotten a better job. And so he did not want me working at night like that. And so it fit his schedule better because that way he did not have to watch the kids and everything else if I didn't work. So that stopped. And we lived out there for 17 years. So that was our primary home that we lived in.
So now you're dealing with him nitpicking your appearance, control, also identity erosion or identity of sense of self. And, you begin to feel like you can't do better. And you don't want to admit that it is a bad situation. And you're just kind of going. And financial stuff becomes a bit of a trap too. He's really not great with the kids. And, people are really there to caretake his moods and his feelings. He blows up easily. It's his way or the highway. His mood dictates everything. So this is happening throughout your house. You've been dealing with this for a long time, but for your kids, do they start feeling this a little bit more?
So we were going to take the kids on vacation once, and it was a matter of he was really worked up about it, very anxious. But anytime we had anything fun to do, he was an ass. I mean, he just was grumpy, and he would just say, well, the kids are loud and I'm just stressed. And growing up, when we would get ready to go on vacation, my parents just made it such a horrible experience. That's just making me nervous for this. It's bringing back those memories. And I don't think that was the case, but it was always an excuse. So a lot of times he would just blow up if my parents or if his parents could be kind of bad about just showing up. And so when that would happen, of course, he would just blow up at him instead of just talking and explaining, hey, can you give us a call before you show up? He would just, completely lose it on his mom, and she'd leave crying and whatnot. He wouldn't do that to my parents, but he would do that to his family. But he would again be upset that my parents were butting in and coming around. So in 2002, he was, because of all that happened with 9/11 and the war starting up and everything else, he was deployed. And so he left in January, and I had a birth of a baby that year, baby number 4. This time he blamed me for being pregnant. Although we had talked about having another baby, he knew that I wasn't on any birth control or any of that. He was very much, oh, great, we don't have the money. Our house isn't done, and just all these things. And so I started having high blood pressure with this pregnancy. And the doctor was wanting me just at home to kind of take it easy and kind of do some bed rest at home. And he did not lift a single finger. He did not help at all. And so my blood pressure continued to go up, and the doctor decided just to go ahead and induce me. And I don't remember it, but, he was, of course, right back to work again. And so when I was not supposed to be carrying things and all of that stuff and going up and downstairs, and I pushed through and I did all that, even though I could tell I wasn't supposed to be doing it. My body was telling me I wasn't supposed to be doing those things. They weren't going to get done unless I did them. But I wasn't very good about asking him to do it at that point, just because I knew I didn't want to hear him and listen to him go on about, why can't I do it? I'm not doing anything type of, argument that you get back. So in January, he was deployed, and I started figuring out that life was a lot more relaxed when he wasn't there. And except for the fact that I knew that he was not in the best situation where he was at. And he would tell me literally everything, which just made me start to have panic attacks. So I had to be put on medicine while he was deployed because it was just too much. So he was actually deployed and extended twice while he was gone. And so he was gone for over a year. He was gone almost 18 months. And he did get to come home. And so he came home. And during that time, I lost weight fairly easily. And a lady at the church that I attended, she's a very wise old woman. And she said to me, "It's funny how you can lose weight when he's gone." And that really struck me. I never thought much about it, but he'd been gone, a couple of times here and there. And she said, you always seem to lose weight when he's gone. And I just was like, it didn't hit me until later on in our marriage what that probably meant. But so he was already getting upset with me because I had hit my low point on my weight while he was gone. And with him coming home, with knowing that he was on the downside, he was going to be coming home, I slowly started gaining weight because he would always ask me, what my weight was. And so it was like, he goes, "Oh, I can't believe you're starting to gain weight before I get home." So that was, like I said, that was always something that was emphasized in our relationship. So he came home and there were some problems going on in his job, him getting back into the spot that he was supposed to be in. And looking back now, I always felt like he was a very honest person. I never questioned anything he said. But now, after going through everything that we have, I really questioned so many stories that he would come home and tell me because he talked about how they weren't giving him his job back and it wasn't right. And he just was so down and so negative about that place. Just every night would complain about his job. And it was so miserable to know when he was going to come home because that's all we were going to listen to is him complain about his job. So he was let go from that job, which was a very good job, very good benefits. And he was the only breadwinner. And so that was really stressful. After that, he got a very good job offshore. And so with that job, he was going to be working a couple of weeks away and then coming home a couple of weeks. And when it would be time for him to get ready to leave, anytime, he had to leave, whether it was for military or with this job for 2 weeks, he would just be a complete ass. I mean, just screaming, yelling. The boys had to be completely quiet. He was very much my way or the highway. Didn't want him to have any friends over when it came to the kids. And so he would get ready to leave and then he'd be gone. And it was like the boys and I could just kind of take a sigh of relief because he's out of the house. And for 2 weeks, we have freedom where we can just let our guard down. And then it was always the day before, like, "Oh my gosh, your dad's coming home tomorrow," And so then it was like, for us, it was more of a stress that he was coming home, where he was excited he was coming home. When he would text me, the messages he sent me when he was gone were just like amazing. It was the love bombing, I guess, at that point when he was gone. But when he was home, it was, he wanted to be there with him all the time when he was there. I was doing a lot of volunteering at our school and he would just throw a fit. Like, "You give them so much time and you don't get paid for it and you're away from the house. And I think you just do it to get away from me." And part of that was probably true, but that was my outlet. And so because when he was home for that 2 weeks, it was daytime, nighttime, it was 24/7 we were together. And I was just getting swallowed up in that. I just could not. I'm suffocating, I guess would be a better word. And so he had that job for a long time. And I went back and finished my degree. And so I did. So I started teaching and that. And again, people think that a teacher's job is from 8 to 3, and then after that, you're done. But there's so much more after that. And so again, it was you're never home. You're always gone. You're doing this to avoid me. Why do you have to, we had nights that we had to work the gate for ball games and different things like that. And it was just over and over. But in front of people, when he would come to games and things like that, he appeared to be, the nicest guy ever. So we went through that, and he had another deployment. This time he volunteered for it. And the boys were becoming teenagers. And so anytime they would stand up to him, I always told him, you need to respect them and they'll respect you. Because he would just talk down to them, call them boy, and want them to come out and help him work on something. And they didn't want to go out there because they knew they were going to get yelled at and screamed at and cussed at. And so there was just a lot of pushback. And I can remember my son being, probably about 13 or so, yelling at me saying, why won't you divorce him? Because the two of them butt heads so badly. So at that point, he was going to be deployed again. And again, I started into my losing weight, lost weight again. And it was so much easier to live without him around and knowing that he wouldn't be back and forth like he was. And so we talked about the fact that it was just so much easier when Dad's not here. It just, there's not as much conflict. People aren't screaming and yelling. I can remember somebody coming to the door to deliver something that we had ordered. And I don't even know why he was screaming and yelling, but I was so embarrassed when I realized somebody was knocking on our door, because I'm sure they heard him just going off. And I was just completely mortified by that, because it was always trying to put on this, we're a great family, there's no problem, to everyone else, including my family. His family probably saw more of that, I know, than what my family did, because he would let his guard down more around his family and be that way, and he wouldn't so much around my family. So that happened. Another time that was a complete embarrassment is I was with one of my sons with the youth group in the car with my preacher and his wife, and we were going to go do this song. I think it was like Christmas or something. We were going to go sing at a nursing home. And he called me, and he's screaming and cussing at me, asking me where some drill or power tool is. And I'm sitting in the back seat, and I'm just hitting the low, trying to turn the volume down just as quickly as I can on my phone, because I really feel like, that she heard that. I don't know if the preacher did, but I feel like his wife heard him screaming and yelling at me. And it was and I was trying to keep a calm voice to not, put off that there was any problem, and just, I don't know where it is, and I have no idea. And he is just completely cussing me out and not even thinking about the fact that where I'm at, who I'm with, or any of that. So he was just kind of in that zone where it didn't matter. So that was another moment of just trying to save face, I guess.
So at this point, we are hearing like these stories that are continuing, the blow-ups, the my way or the highway kind of abuser. But what I'm also hearing is that you are in survival mode, and you are all surviving the best way that you know how, doing whatever is going to make your life easier. And you're waiting for those deployments, hoping he has a work trip offshore. These are your reprieves. He may be deploying for war, but for you, it's your reprieve from war. Him coming back is you being under attack, and same for the children. And this is right now just all about survival at this point until you figure out a way, to leave the battlefield for good. So, from this point, you're fighting this war all the time. You get these little reprieves, but did the abuse ever ramp up even further, or was it just more of the same?
It did, especially as the boys were in their teens. There were times that I had to get between him and especially one of the twins. They really butt heads a lot, and he would really stick up for himself and where they would push each other. There was a time that our middle son, when he was teaching him to drive, my youngest son was in the back seat. I wasn't there. And he smacked him in the face when he's learning to drive. And it was a stick shift, mind you. So, that's a lot for a kid to try to manipulate, driving and shifting and all of this. And then your dad screaming and yelling at you. And I was just livid. I was like, I can't believe you would smack him in the face. Like, he had never done that for a kid before. And his younger brother was he was so upset about it. And his reasoning was, well, he wouldn't listen to me. It's like, that could have caused him to wreck even more that you'd done that, So definitely as they became teenagers, he became more aggressive with them as well. And so the boys, as soon as they were 18, they were out of the house. And so we quickly went from a 6-person household to a 3-person household with just, as in my youngest. And I always say, it's a habit that I've gotten into, but I feel like they are my boys. And I feel like in some ways they are my boys more than his boys. And I think they would say that as well, just because of the separation between them all. But he came back, and I think it was easier for me to start losing weight. Like I said, when he was gone, he'd be gone for 2 weeks and home for 2 weeks. I had that separation away from him. And so I got started into doing fitness and losing weight and started really getting a lot more confident in myself. And I was encouraged by someone that I worked with to go back to school to get my master's, and that I should get in administration. And so that was the spark that kind of got me to go back to school. And when I did that, he told me, that's great. I'll help you around the house. He made all these promises. And so he might have washed a load of clothes here and there, but I was to make big over that fact that he had, washed some clothes or dishes in the dishwasher. That was a big deal. And other than that, when he was home for those 2 weeks, he would just sit in his chair, and it was never his fault why nothing was fixed. And so 2016, I had finally told him that I wasn't happy in our marriage, and that I didn't know if I wanted to stay married anymore. And that just hit him, just completely floored him. And, he begged me and begged me, and he said he'd change. He knew that he had all these problems and that he would change. And I just needed to give him a chance. And when I started losing weight, then he started losing weight, and he wanted to do everything together. So he was like, I'm going to do all these things and we'll be together, and, it'll just be you and me kind of thing. And I thought, okay, we have been married so many years. I have to at least give him this. If he's going to really try and change, we've had discussions of this in the past, but if he's really, truly going to try and change, I need to at least give him that and see. And so we went away on a couple of little vacations, just the two of us. And he was, love bombing, poured it on thick, and he wanted to renew our vows because we were coming up into our 25th wedding anniversary, and that would be a way to renew our vows. And so I felt like I was back in that moment of when I got married again, like, why am I doing this kind of thing? But I played along, and I feel bad for that because I feel like I did kind of play him, but then I also felt like this was our chance at renewal. Things were going to change. And so we renewed our vows. At that point, when I look back, I'm like, I should have at that point just been done. But we did that and tried a little bit longer. And so then he lost his job again. I was about at the point that I was going to tell him that I couldn't anymore when that happened. And so then at that point, I thought I can't be the person that leaves you, at the time that you've lost your job. So I didn't say a word about it. And he got a job that was definitely not what he went to college for. It was more of a labor job, and he absolutely hated it. But I have to give him credit again because he always provided. And so I'm working, he's working, and he is just miserable, and he is making everyone else miserable because he absolutely hates his job. And so he's again trying to get back on the management side of that. And he finally gets back on again. And so I finally told him, I can't. Things haven't really changed. We went right back to where we were, and I just can't anymore. And he started just completely leaving it in the way. I mean, of course I got tears, crying, I'm sorry, and I can really try, you need to let me. And I just, at that point, I had stuck my foot down. I was like, no. And at that point, I was really researching and looking at things because I was trying to see, what other women have went through. How do you decide you want a divorce and all of those types of things? And one article I had read said, women tend to, a few years before, know when they're done and make that decision a couple of years before they actually do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's me, and it's something I can kind of relate with. And so he said to me, will you please go to marriage counseling? So again, I thought, okay, that's one thing we haven't tried yet. So yeah, I'll do that. We'll go to marriage counseling. And during this time, I mean, he's getting my phone in the middle of the night, searching it to see, because he just had set in his mind that there's no way that I would just walk away, that there had to be somebody else. And I was like, there's nobody else. I'm just done. And I think because of the fact that I lost almost 100 pounds. And so I had a lot of confidence, and I was just ready to live my life. And I felt like, at that point, when you look at the fact that, okay, we've been married 25 years, do I want to do another 25 like this? Because of the fact that I just felt like I was a lot more confident with myself, I just realized that, no, I do not. I can't do this. I was at the point where I couldn't stand him. It just, to hear him talk and go on about all his complaints and all of his things, it just, inside of me, I just wanted to scream, just because I was just so done listening to him. But once I told him, okay, I'll go to counseling, he again, kind of being love bombish and being nice and trying to be nice to my son. And so I called this counselor and told him a little bit of the situation. And he told me that normally he meets with each person separately before they ever come together to discuss the issue. And I went to go see him. He just asked the right questions, I guess, because I went to him and he would ask me certain questions that just brought up things that I hadn't thought about for years. When we finished that first time, he said, you're probably going to have some things come through your mind. And if you can take a second and write some stuff down that we can go over the next time, that's real helpful. And so I was like, okay. So I left there and my mind was just spinning, just thinking back through the years and my feelings and things and such. And so I knew that I couldn't go straight home because he would just be at the door asking me how it went and everything. And so I went to the school, I went to my classroom, and I just sat down and I just started writing. um, and just wrote down any kind of thought that came to my mind. And I sat down. I was there for probably an hour or two before I ever went home. And so some of the things I wrote down was that I was mad at myself for putting up with it, but I was scared to leave because I was afraid of not being able to make it. I didn't want to admit failure. And I never thought I would let myself get in an abusive situation. I thought I was smarter than that. And I thought I was more of a confident and outspoken person in what happened to me. I felt like I had a lot of regret for raising my children in that kind of an environment because I had not grown up in that myself. And I was fearful at that point as to what kind of relationships my boys would have with their wives and how they would treat them. I felt like I settled. I didn't think that I was really worth finding what I really wanted. And I didn't want to wait and see if that person ever existed. Even though I was just a 16-year-old, I was afraid of being alone and never having a boyfriend. At that point, that's where I was at. And then when it came to anxiety, I think that I was a horrible, horrible nail biter all while we were married. And he absolutely hated that. And I think it was partially because of all the anxiety that I held inside instead of getting it out. That was the way I got it out, just through chewing my nails. So my other notes that I had made was that I was ready to break free. I felt like I'd finally have gained some maturity, and that was hard for me to swallow, to think that I saw myself as so immature through those years that I could be manipulated by him, and more that like feeling like a child, I guess. So he had asked me, well, who would I want to be with? And at that point I was like, that's not where my mind is right now. Like, I'm not even there. And he goes, okay, that's fine. But just be thinking about, what type of person do you want to be with? And so I was like, somebody that doesn't judge other people or criticize me or my family, someone that's positive, that has a giving heart, that wants to volunteer, because those are things that are important to me, that doesn't judge others. And so I decided, I needed to put my happiness first, and also to stop being afraid of what others think, because I had that whole just keeping it hush hush and not letting anyone know there was ever a problem. And I also had finally came to a point where I was okay with being alone, and that I didn't need somebody else to be happy, and that I was, I'm worth being happy and not feeling anxious all the time. And so those were words that I wrote down that night. And when I got home, as soon as I walked in the door, he was just like asking me, so what did he say? What did you say? All of these things. And when I started talking to him about what we talked about, his comment to me was, well, he's not doing his job right. And it made me laugh, because I was like, well, he's not doing what you think he should do, but he's the therapist, you're not, And so the next time I went to therapy, my therapist asked me, I went over my notes with him, and he asked me about how things went. And I said, well, as soon as I walked in the door, he just hit me with all these questions. And he said, you do not have to, you owe him nothing. Like, you do not have to answer any of his questions. And so we did some role playing on how I was to handle that when I got back home, which was very, very helpful for me. And I wish we'd done that at that first meeting, because I think that would have helped set me up for that when I got home that night. But the time that my ex was supposed to go to the therapist, he came home that night, and he was like, he was really disappointed in you. He couldn't believe that you had done some of the things that I told him. And at that point, I was smart enough to know that during my 2 times with that therapist, he never cast judgment on my ex and never made comments like that. So I knew that that was a lie, that that was not something that he was doing. And he was just trying to manipulate me and make me not want to go to the therapy again, So I was just glad that at that point I had wised up a little bit. And so that was the only therapy sessions we had. And while he was at the house, I had asked him to please move out. He was adamant, you're not taking anything of mine, and this house is mine, and you're not taking my retirement. It was all money based, all of the assets, all of those things. and he got a lot more aggressive with me. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want this house. You can have this house. At that point, I had finished my master's as well, and I was trying to get a job in administration. And I said, you can have this house. But would you please just let the two of us live here, and you go live, with your parents until the school year's over. So that, because our school was really close by. And for a long time, he would not. And so it was such a blessing for me that he worked nights, because at least I only had to spend time with him on the weekends. But we went out one night, he was like, let's go out. And he got completely drunk and did not want to give me the keys and really scared me. He was trying to keep me where we were at and didn't want to let me come home. And I finally was able to get the keys and drive us home. But he had me at a point where I was scared that he wasn't going to let me go and he was going to keep me. He wanted to go get this hotel room and stay. And our son was in high school, but he wasn't going to let me come home. And that really scared me. So he went from just one extreme to the other when it came to alcohol. His demeanor completely changed. And so he finally was willing to leave. And he just kept saying, but will you still be my friend? And will you still be my friend? You've always been my angel. You've been my rock. And you've, always done everything. And of course, I kept telling him, I will still be your friend. He goes, but I know that if you leave me and we divorce, if you change your mind, you're so stubborn, you won't admit and you won't come back to me. And of course, I told him, oh, I would, of course, I knew in my mind, dude, I'm done. Like, I am so far done. When you get to that point, like, I had no second thought. So fast forward to him finally moving out. And I had told him that I was going to get my own checking account, but I would still pay bills and all of that stuff. And so I continued to do that. And I ended up getting a job at another district in another town. And I had told my son, if we move, I'm going to do my best to keep you as close to home as possible, but I can't make that promise. And so we moved a ways away to where he was going to have to go to school with me, or he'd have to live with his dad. And he was in no way wanted to live with his dad at that point. And so we got our divorce, and he, finished a year of school before we started into our new school. During that time, my ex had gotten a DWI, something I never thought would ever happen in a million years from him. I helped him out with that when that happened. It was right before we had divorced. He again denied, said I was actually falling asleep. I wasn't really, drunk like they said I was, but yet he blew, I can't remember what it was, but it was well over the limit. And my boys at that point kept him at a distance for the most part. My youngest had said, Mom, I didn't just go through this abuse once. I went through it twice. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, when my brothers were older and they were fighting with Dad, I was in the other room. He would go in the other room and hide. So he had to listen to it then. And then when he went through it himself. So that was something that really put things into perspective with me. And I've talked to my boys about, the guilt that I have for keeping them in that situation and what it's done to them.
So now you're divorced. You told me that the book Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist, How to End the Drama and Get On with Life by Margalise Felstad was very helpful for you. But how has the other parts of the healing process been? How have things been going for you?
I really dug down more deep and found, like your podcast and a couple more books that I read a little bit and just some online things and just trying to make sense of it and move on, I guess, and personal forgiveness and everything else. I don't have to deal with my narcissist a whole lot because of the fact that, my son is as old as he is, thank goodness. I've thought about therapy. With the way my job is right now, it's so crazy. It's hard to get away from for the meetings that I need to get away for. So that's one of those things that I feel like more and more I can see where it would be helpful, even in my job, just to help me be a more confident person and not second guess myself. So that would be one thing that I could see being a benefit. But something that I have really turned to is I do a lot of, I wouldn't call it meditation, but just like breathing exercises when I do feel myself getting anxious. From when I started losing weight and everything else, I really did a lot of self-talk and just trying to be more of a motivator to myself, or thinking through after something happens, like trying to see the other side of things and how I should do it differently, I guess I would say. I've read several books, and a lot of that has been conversations between my older boys and I, because they'll watch things as well and learn things. And that's one of the things that I'm very hopeful conversations I've had with my older son is, hey, you do have some tendencies like your dad, and you really need to be mindful of this. And he knows that. And so if I see something or watch something or whatever else, we send things and forth to each other as well. So I think that's been helpful.
And if you had any words of wisdom, what would they be?
Yeah, I guess I would say to people is another big mistake I made, because he made me feel like, how dare I get a divorce from him type thing. He was just like so adamant that I not take any of his money, when it came to retirement. That, I had spent many, many years as a housewife and many, many years taking care of our children and taking care of everything, and through his deployments and all of that. Yet he didn't feel like I had the right to any of that. And I backed down on it. I let him have all of his retirement. I didn't take any of it because I just wanted to be done. Like, it just, looking back now, I should have dug my feet in and at least tried to help support myself a little bit, because I went to work much later than most people, and so my retirement is not going to be anything like what it would have been if I'd been in, working longer. And so that's one thing that I definitely regret. And then he was like, he tried to get me to not make him pay child support. And he said, I will take care of him. Don't worry about that. I'll take care of him. And I was like, no, you're going to pay child support. Well, then when I came through with what the state had said, based on his income, he should pay, he just lit. I mean, he was so mad and cussing and screaming and yelling and how dare. And I said, I'm not asking for that. So then I just completely started backing down, and I was like, I'm not asking for that. I'm just telling you this is what the attorney gave me and everything else. So again, I settled for about $300 less a month on child support. So things like that, when you go back and look at things, he was supposed to pay for insurance and help pay for cell phone, and I pay for those things, and I just do, because it's better than having to put up with the fight. So that would be my other advice, is that it's worth a little fuss in the beginning to get more what you deserve. And I wasn't trying to get anything over the top or anything like that. It would have been, now looking at my life now, it's like, okay, that would have been a little bit more helpful. And now I see the fact that, yeah, I did deserve that, because I did this for this many years, and I should have had some of that.
Well, Mackenzie, I really want to thank you for being our guest today, validating everyone's experiences of coercive control, the tactics used, the psychology of staying, and what it is to survive, and how you survive for all of those years. And you really did a service for everyone today. So from the bottom of my heart, a big, big thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much as well.
Well, thank you, Mackenzie, once again for being our guest. And if you want to be a guest like Mackenzie was today, go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form button at the top of the page, fill out that form and click the submit button, or email us at narcissistapocalypse@pm.me. Also at our website, we have a newsletter. If you want to join our newsletter today. Go to our website and sign up. You get a free workbook from this episode in that newsletter. And we also have a support group at our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. So if you need support, join our support group today. Click on the support group button at the top of the page, and you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday night, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. Forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. Join our support group today if you need support. And that is it for today's survivor story. So for myself and Mackenzie, we hope you have a good night.